Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to the weekend review edition of Celtic Down Under from the West Australia contingent, hosted by myself, Sean, joined by Anthony and Paul. So, Paul, I heard you were out watching the Matildas with your friends. Talk us through how your early afternoon, evening event was on Saturday.
Yeah, so I got together with a few of my mates. Essentially, it was supposed to be for the kickoff. They're all English lads for the EPL kickoff, and then it went forward to the Western Derby AFL,
Ah,
and then it came forward all the way to the Matildas for those of us that could get a pass. So yeah, started on the Bears just before 3, and I was still up watching the Scottish rugby game against France at sometime after 4 a.m. So yeah, it was a bit rough on Sunday, but yeah, like great Arvo, brilliant game. Like yeah, just everything you would want in a competitive tie. And then obviously Australia got the result as well. So pretty tense shootout, but we got there in the end.
for anyone that missed it, there was 10 penalties to each side. It was 7-6, I think. Australia had two chances in sudden death to go through and missed both of them, scored in the
Mm.
third one, something like that. Australian
And we're
keeper,
going and we're going second, so obviously had that
I'm
pressure of always
looking
having to
second, yeah.
score.
Hmm.
Always having to score, even if they, even if they scored, that was them sort of
Hmm.
hanging on in as well. So yeah, it was high pressure.
There was even a retake at one point. But even the one that we needed to score to win, and the French goalkeeper, pulls off an outstanding save.
Mm.
The keeper had been subbed on in the 119th minute, just four penalties. Yeah, it was actually a pretty good game. Anthony, did you enjoy it?
Yeah, no, I was down south with me, seeing my parents, so we made a hasty retreat from lunch, and we had headed back home and watched it, and it was some game. I mean, it had everything. I mean, there was a goal disallowed for France. The ball went out, and it was given a corner, and it didn't actually go out, so it was a bit controversial there. And then they scored from it, but the referee managed to find a foul, which may or may not have been there. So that kind of equaled the ledger there. And then the penalty shootout. I mean, Mackenzie Arnold, the goalkeeper for Australia, I mean, incredible. I mean, to have the composure, he pulls some great saves, miss her own penalty, which could have won it within the 5 normal penalties, and then have a save disallowed, and then save again after that. I mean, that was a man of the player of the match performance, I should say. But the game had it all. I mean, if that was the final, you'd have taken that. I think FIFA would have taken that, because that game they both left it on there. They were both absolutely exhausted by the end of that 120 minutes. So a great game of football, and it was entertaining. The whole country is behind them. That was now the highest rating sports event or TV event in Australia for the last 20 years. So quite incredible. And yeah, we're obviously facing England on Wednesday night, 6 p.m. Western Australian time. So yeah, box office, and
That'll be 11 a.m. in Scotland.
so yeah, I definitely, if you have the opportunity to switch on and watch it, definitely do, because it's going to be a show.
The best thing about Australia and England in the semi is that no matter what, I've got someone to support in the final, because I'll be supporting Australia if they get there, and if England get there, I'll be supporting whoever's England's playing, right? And for anyone that doesn't know, it's Spain and Sweden in the other match.
It is.
So that World Cup final is on at 6 p.m. I think on Sunday. Is there 6 p.m. or 6:30?
It is 6 p.m. WA time. Yeah, so
Yeah.
same time as the semi on Wednesday.
Yeah, so I'll be playing it. I've got a game at 3 o'clock. Finish that at 5. Get in for the game at 6. Should be a nice Sunday, and then Celtic on at 10 p.m. So it should be a
10
nice
p.m.,
good
yeah.
Sunday.
I think
and Paul, you mentioned sorry. Did you still talk about the?
Yeah, I was going to
Matildas
say one more thing on the Matildas game. I just like Mary Fowler's been an amazing player
a new
for
favorite
Australia
player.
in it.
Oh my goodness!
And like she's 20 years old. She's already at Man City. She's the one that played that killer pass, threaded it through the eye of a needle past 3 players for Caitlin Ford's goal against Denmark to sort of start that off and running. But she had a great game, but she probably missed 3 or 4 good chances in the match that would have closed it out for the Aussies. Like, and the French had probably at least more than their fair share. Certainly first half they dominated. Second half Australia had more chances. Majority of them fell to Fowler. They were blocked, or she didn't quite finish. She played the whole match with a smile on her face, like it was, down the local park. Seemed to have no pressure on her shoulders on a home World Cup. And then when she steps up for the penalty, despite, having potentially all this sort of stress that she's blown chances during the game, she hits one of the best penalties you'll see in a shootout.
Of any player of any gender ever.
Absolutely smashes it in the bottom corner with the instep, and then just like jogs back to the centre circle, kind of laughing. It's like she plays the game with such a level of freedom, and yeah, you can see she's just enjoying herself, and yeah, I think she's safely going to be the one that takes over the mantle of Sam Kerr as the hero of the Matildas going forward. And she could be the best player in the world at some point. Like she's probably in the mix already. So yeah, really exciting. Let's hope they can turn over the English and then it's a bit of a fairy tale story as they stay in the tournament. So 2 to go.
100% agree with you on Mary Fowler. I really enjoyed that penalty. Fords looked good as well. We've got some good players.
Tamika Yallop for me was the one, because she looked up like she was going to absolutely smash the leather off it, and then she was the only one to send the French goalkeeper the wrong way and just side-footed it in the net and made it look dead easy. And it's just like, it's how easy it can be, but I have to say that French goalkeeper, she apart from that one penalty, she went the right way every time. So the decision to substitute her on almost paid dividends. But yeah, like I said, it was an incredible match, an incredible moment in sport and history, particularly in Australia, and one that will probably hopefully only be eclipsed by a victory, not only on Wednesday but on Sunday.
And bring on the English. And just before we move on to Celtic, if Shane is listening, I hope you enjoyed the Western Derby on Saturday.
He would have.
No, he wouldn't have. No, the biggest ever defeat in a Western Derby for the Eagles, 101 points.
I think he's also upset because, as you know, his heroes keep retiring. So Nick Nat's now.
Is that what it was?
He's retiring as well.
He didn't see it coming. Apparently 2 years on the sidelines with injury wasn't enough. So sorry, Shane. Yeah. But the writing was on the wall with big Nick Nat. So
yeah, so I think that's 3 of them now retired. So yeah, it's there's a major rebuild on the cards unrequired at West Coast Eagles, but maybe we should crack on with football, and we're back to football and back to Celtic.
Let's talk about round ball, the one where they kick it on the ground instead of throwing it in the air and call it football. So the game was midday in Scotland, which meant there was a bit of a journey for Celtic fans getting up there. I always wonder about these scheduling things, but I guess it's all Sky Sports related, isn't it? Get up there, weather's decent, not been any rain apparently because the pitch was bone dry, which was complained about post-match by manager and players alike. And we had quite a thunderous game. Anthony, how did you take it in overall?
It was quite an entertaining game. It was, I sort of sit there trying to sort of sum it up, and it just felt really quite end-to-end, quite open. At 2-1, I kind of felt that we were still vulnerable. I kind of felt like they could easily made it 2 each. We were obviously gifted a bit of a good chance to go back in the lead again. We'll touch on the goals individually in a bit, but first half didn't quite have the control in a game that Celtic usually, I won't say expect, but kind of what we've come to expect. So it was quite open, quite ragged. Second half, some substitutions made at half time, one through injury, one through a bit of tactical change, and that paid. I thought that made a bit of a difference straight away. And then we get the goal with 10 minutes to go, and it just kind of kills it from there. After that, I felt, we're home and hosed from here, sort of thing. So it was all right, but I felt the substitutes made a difference when they came on. But yeah, just like I said, entertaining. Like, if you were neutral watching that, you go, "Oh, that was a really entertaining game of football." Definitely the best Aberdeen's played against us in a long time. Like, I can't remember the last time Aberdeen really pushed us like that. That you're going back to, Derek McInnes when probably Brendan Rodgers was there the last time. But probably. But yeah, really, like I said, entertaining match. Had to work for it, had to fight for it. We did fight for it. We did get the result. So 3 points down the road, but yeah, wasn't plain sailing. Still not the finished article, but again, we'll touch on it individually. But yeah, like I said, enough there to be happy. But definitely you're probably left wanting more, shall we say?
Yeah, the first was going to say it's in the first 5 minutes, I felt like they did more to trouble us than they did in all of their games combined last season. I remember that 1-0 game in January or December. I don't remember which month it was. And the sum total of their attacking intent was a run forward by Duke, who dived when he got within 25 yards of the goal. And that was literally it for the whole game. Whereas this one, they like equaled us for... I think we had 27 touches in the box and they had 26, so it was roughly even in that terms. They had fewer shots on target. They in the first half in particular, I felt really threatened. They had 2 free headers from quite close range that both went over the bar, and it's like a very different story if those go in. Paul, how did you feel? First half versus second half, was a different feel to the game for you?
Well, before I get into that,
Yeah,
on the weather. I saw Jamesy Forrest putting sunscreen on because they've got that outdoor bench, and I was like, even in August in Aberdeen, that's my neck of the woods, right? I'm from less than an hour up the road from there, and I went to uni in Aberdeen. It's like I very rarely remember having to get sunscreen on, even back then. So it was obviously a beautiful day. The locals must have come out in force because I think it was a sellout. I think obviously there was a lot of chat about allocations and stuff like that, and Aberdeen were being quite bullish, saying, "Oh well, we expect to sell our allocations. That's why we might reduce our away allocations." Now I don't think they did for us this time, but they sold their full application. So I think it was a full house basically. So cracking atmosphere, good game. In terms of how I felt about both games, I think first half it was we just never really seemed to get fully into our stride. They probably started a bit better, a bit like Ross County did the week before. We kind of got the goal out of nothing, and you sort of expecting that to build into us getting under control and starting to build ourselves into the game, and it doesn't really happen. And then I thought the second half was more disjointed, I think, with a mixture of injuries and substitutions, and we had the cushion, so we didn't. I think we sort of felt like we played within ourselves a little bit more. I didn't think, difficult to say, like I think it was, but I didn't really feel as threatened second half as I did first. Albeit you always want, like they were never out of it, right? At 2-1, they're never out of it. But I think first half, to Anthony's point, there was a lot of corners. They peppered the box. They've got quite a lot of big guys. They loaded it in. And you're right, there's the odd chance that they had, or, there's a few last ditch header clearance. I think Ralston had one at the back post. Hart, obviously, has not been short of criticism, including us, but I thought he had a pretty accomplished game. He defended his box pretty well. He opted to punch pretty much constantly, but he got something on pretty much everything that came into his area. And it wasn't the Alamo, but equally it wasn't like, we were under a fair bit of pressure, and it, one of those or two of those could have gone in. I think the goal we lost was pretty poor. We'll get into that in a little bit more detail in a bit, but I've seen a lot of criticism generally about the performance on social media, and I just think that it's the second game of the season. It's going to be one of the hardest fixtures of the season, right? Aberdeen finished third. They're looking like, at least that this season, maybe press first, second, who knows? But they're like, and going there that early in the season with injuries, with hopefully not a full bunch of signings in the door yet, it was always going to be a tricky tie. Like, I don't think we've got. I think some Celtic fans have got an expectation that we just rock up and beat teams, and that's the God-given right. Whereas, Barry Robson's now in his, he's in his second season. He had them well drilled. They're bang up for it. It's not perfect, but 3-1 at Pittodrie, second game of the season. I ain't got too many complaints in terms of. I think there's a few people starting to panic because as that clock ticks down, I'm not there yet, but we definitely need to see movement in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, sorry, trying to figure out which. Covered a couple of points there. Joe Hart. So we had, you mentioned Joe Hart did get a lot of praise. he did come for a lot, and he looked like he might have got injured at one point, but at the same time, he was also one offside flag away from a red card, right? So
Yeah, that's true.
like, do we? Are we comfortable going forward with Hart? Does he seem better? And you also mentioned that Celtic have been getting a lot of criticism, and you think that's unfair. But who else was critical of the performances in the last two games? Apart was the manager and the players in their post matches have also said that they've used Bird's terms like new system, not where we want to be, all that sort of thing. So they've been self-critical as well as some of the fans been critical. So I get what you're saying, like it's a good result, but there's been criticism from within as well.
There's absolutely room for improvement, but does anyone think we should be the finished article in week 2 of the season? I just think there's a disconnect with reality from a lot of our fan base. Yes, we came off a treble win, but it's not the same season. We've now got new managers. Some players have gone. They've had their break. They're still coming back up to full fitness and match fit and all the other bits and people. Like, I don't know. It's not Football Manager. Do you know what I mean? It's real football, and you've got to, you've got all these sort of different variables going on. I think you can be pleased with the result and still think there's room for improvement in the performance, and I think that's where I'm at with it. I'm pretty content with the result. Very content with the result. 3 points and 2 goal difference, and there's nothing wrong with that. Like I said last week, if this is month 2 or 3 down the track and the performances are still like this and a bit disjointed, then yes, I'm more concerned. But for now, I'm willing to let this sort of play out and us get us up fully up to speed. We do need reinforcements, and to the Hart question, assuming that's not rhetorical, is no, I don't think we should be pushing ahead with Hart as our only choice. I think we need, like I said last week, we need a goalkeeper in now, whether that's to walk straight into the team or at least challenge and put pressure on. Because you're right, that could have been. But what does he do? Does he, I don't know. Like, he was left in a pretty poor position in terms of the defense got themselves caught with one long ball over the top. Like, he's exposed at that point. He shouldn't be in that position. The defense should be dealing with that.
Anthony, any concerns?
Yeah, well, I don't think we defended that well, particularly in the first half. Like Carter Vickers gets caught out for the ball over the top for the goal. He misread that one, whether he's 100% or was 100%. He's falls into the Ralston camper coming back off a bit of a layoff. So, he wasn't probably at his best, and he came off at half time, which is obviously a concern. So I'm hobbling to the bench halfway through the second half. So that's a major concern. I thought Narovsky played pretty well, just especially given the fact that he was partnering Carter Vickers in the first half and then had to adjust to partnering with Stephen Welsh in the second half, who I also thought didn't really do anything wrong either. I once or twice maybe dropped off a bit too quickly. His positional sense was maybe a little bit off, but he got his head on quite a few crosses. Anthony Ralston had a better performance this week than he did last week, so that he's in an upward trajectory. And again, we said this last week, if he gets some game time and he gets some minutes under his legs, we'd expect him to be improving back towards where we know he can get to and where he can play. Biggest concern, I think, on the weekend was Greg Taylor, to be honest. He totally left his man for the first goal. I mean, as much as Narosti was there, Milevski sort of left Taylor for dead. He didn't track him. Taylor lost the ball a lot, and he was having a torrid time. I can't remember the right winger for Aberdeen, but he was
Norris.
It might be.
Morris, I think it is, yeah.
He gave him a hell of a time, and that's 2 weeks in a row now. And two bad performances don't make a pattern. That's just 2 dots on a line. But you kind of want to be thinking that he'd be starting to sort of show some signs of improvement, and whether he's sort of stuck in this mire of, well, Ange had me playing one way and Brendan wants me to play another way, and he's a bit sort of stuck between the two. I'm not too sure, but he's looking all over the place at the moment. And then with Bernabé missing the team meeting, he's the guy that's supposed to be putting pressure on him, shooting himself in the foot. So that for me is probably, I'd say, the biggest sort of concern. Joe Hart, I thought Joe Hart actually had a reasonable game. Like he collected and came for everything this week. Last week he was guilty of that first goal. He should have claimed it or attempted to claim it, and he didn't. And for me, that's, as a goalkeeper, that's not on. So this week at least he was coming for everything, and yeah, he misjudged that one, and thankfully he was offside. Otherwise it would have been a red card and he would have been off. But I kind of feel that he did everything he could in terms of, so that doesn't change the fact that we need someone putting pressure on him. And I think some of the word around the camp is that Cedrus is now going out on loan and we're going to try and bring in another goalkeeper. So I kind of hope that does happen. But yeah, I think we might seriously need to be considered looking at a left back as well, because like I said, it's only been 2 games, but he's way off where he was last season. And with Champions League football coming up, you really need your fullbacks to at least be defensively sound. Whether they're contributing much going forward, that's something else, but they really need to be defensively sound. And I felt Taylor was getting himself tied in knots on the weekend. And I was saying it's just Aberdeen, but that was a case in point of, if he's getting put under a lot of pressure, he seemed to struggle a bit.
Yeah, on Nawrocki, it was. I actually thought I may be a little bit harsh, but I thought he'd had a poor first half. But because he was getting caught out of position a few times, and there was wrong side of the man a few times. But then he was much better second half, and I don't know if that's just the shape of the game changed. And with Turnbull going off, we weren't losing the ball in as many vulnerable areas. Even Callum McGregor had been losing it in vulnerable areas in the first half, and that kind of tightened up in the second half. So I think when we started to get it wider, and when we were either breaking through, and we were turning over. It was in wide positions in the second half, and that seemed to have us in a much better defensive shape when we were losing it in those areas. And Nawrocki dealt with it a lot better, I thought, in the second half. And Turnbull really apparently lost possession like 8 or 9 times in the first half, and he was really a passenger, and he really let everyone know it when he gets himself booked. Like, that was the most stupid. Like, what did he think was going to happen there? Do you know what I mean? Like, maybe he doesn't expect to get booked, but there's no way he thinks there's anything less than a free kick happening there. And that was just like an act of desperate frustration and just making sure everyone noticed that he was having a really bad first half, because he obviously felt it himself. Paul, Turnbull, what do you think? Oh, Hattati. If you talk about Hattati as well.
Well, but let's talk about the pair of them, and we'll mention Carl in this as well. I think Turnbull had a shocker, to be honest. Like, he's coming on the back of getting all the big ups. He's scored a couple of goals. He's had a good game last week, and I suggested maybe despite that game, tactically, you might go with Hattati at Aberdeen, just in terms of energy and work rate and all of that sort of stuff. And it's also quite hard to drop somebody who's been given the man of the match and scored a couple of goals. So fair enough, he kept his place. But yeah, I was delighted to see him hooked, because you're right. That's where we turned the ball over in midfield. He was guilty. Cal didn't have a very good game at all, to be honest. Like, if Anthony's right, Taylor was the worst performer, but Gregor wasn't too far behind him. And it sort of like, it's one of those, he's got credits in the bank, so we sort of let him off with one. But it is slightly concerning, because you're just used to him putting in the 7 and 8 out of 10 performances, which we talked about that a lot last season. And he sort of flies under the radar because he's so steady, but he didn't look great. And I it's I'm putting it down, hopefully, just to the fact that he's not used to playing in there with Turnbull, and there was pressure being created on them because they were turning balls over and they weren't as neat and tidy through there as they usually are. Hattati had a 20-minute cameo, and he looked great, to be honest. Like, his movement was better, his passing was, as you would expect, nice and neat and tidy. He went up through the gears a couple of times when he chose to run with the ball rather than just look for a pass, but he was pretty much like moving constantly around. Once he made a pass, he wasn't standing still. He was looking for the next ball. And yeah, it was disappointing. Obviously, he took the knock, and hopefully it's nothing major. I think it's a calf, and I think it was potentially I don't know if it's an impact injury or a pull. If it's an impact injury, that's probably better than if it's a pull. But we'll wait.
It looked like a pull.
Yeah.
It was the front. He was holding the front sides. That's Yeah, that's behind the shin guards. That's not normally impact, right?
I thought it was a calf as opposed to the.
Yeah, it was calf. But when you saw it, they said calf, but when they're showing it on TV, it was like he was getting treatment on the front of his leg, so like shin splints kind of area.
Right. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, anyway, I thought he played well. And actually, even when Home came on, he did better than Turnbull as well. So, like, obviously, there's a lot of chat about, we'll probably see a new contract for Turnbull, and I think he's in the plans. And obviously, the Scottish based player thing, he ticks that box. But I think he could find himself back down the pecking order relatively quickly if everyone's fit and in form, and Home continues at the sort of trajectory that he looks like he might go in, because I thought he was great when he came on.
Well, he was on ahead of Iwata, so that speaks volumes, right?
Well, yeah.
Who stayed on the bench. Yeah, but I like the look of Home. He looked tidy, but I'm not a fan. So far, I'm not a fan of him as a person, right? And I'm sure we can talk about the social media thing. But even before he came, what was all the stuff that was dug up of all the posts that he'd been liking before? It was all like the toxic masculinity crap, wasn't it? And the turf stuff, the anti. The binary gender stuff, right? And then and then he posts the lyrics of the Aberdeen player. What was it? I don't want to
Kendrick
swear.
Lamar.
It was a Kendrick Lamar. I didn't even realize it was lyrics until somebody pointed it out to me. Oh, he's just posting lyrics to a song. I was like, I don't know this song.
It was like "Bitch Sit Down" or something like that.
Yeah. So I went and found this song. It is vulgar. It is. I would not listen to this music. I would not be happy with this music playing in my house. It is the most vile song not but is up there as one of the most vile songs I've ever heard. Misogynistic crap. And if that is what he's posting lyrics of, I don't care what the context is. I do not want that. That boy needs an attitude readjustment. He needs some education. And if he doesn't get it, I don't want him playing for Celtic. That sort of thing. Sorry, you can come in a second. But that, again, just from tidbits of social media, if that's just kind of glances of his character showing through, then that is not the sort of person I want wearing a Celtic strip. Anthony?
It didn't stay up for very long, so hopefully somebody in the team had a word and sort of said that you're not going to last very long in Glasgow if that's your your attitude, and you're going to paint a very, very big target on your back very, very quickly. And playing for Celtic, it doesn't really take much anyway. So we'll see. I guess is what will happen there. To my point last week, I said that Turnbull and Riley in the same team against better opposition will get found out, and not sooner than a week later. That's what happens. I think David Turnbull looks good against weaker opposition, and when you're playing at home, but when you're away from home and you're up against it, and Aberdeen were in our faces, I've got serious concerns, and they were justified in the first half. And my old man was tearing his hair out when he found out that Tatty wasn't starting. And I must admit, the 20 minutes, as Paul said, 20 minutes he was on his goods. That pass, that sort of scissor, like he plays that pass where he just hits it to the opposite wing. You're thinking, it looks good. Shame he's come off, and that means the lights are home, and hopefully Iwata are in the mix for a trip to Kilmarnock in the Cup next this Sunday coming. But I guess, and I agree, Paul, I haven't seen Callum McGregor get his pockets picked that many times in a game in a long time. Like, he was quite ratty in possession, like giving the ball away a fair bit, which is very unlike him. At least if he's having a bad game, he usually is able to retain possession, but he was actually turning the ball over far more frequently than I've seen in quite a long time. So he was under pressure. Don't get me wrong, Aberdeen were definitely man marking and making it difficult, but yeah, definitely not one of his better performances. That much is for sure.
Links in together though, right? So Turnbull's causing turnovers, Taylor's all over the shop, so he's kind of plugging gaps, isn't he? Like, he's got his, the boat's leaking, and he's trying to keep the thing afloat, and it had a kind of knock-on effect. And then he's obviously got a new centre back pairing behind him. Then that changes. So I got some sympathy for him. He's also played 60 odd games a season for 5 or 6 seasons straight. So at some point that is gonna eventually take its toll.
And trying to
It's
play a
just-
slightly different style as well. That's the other thing. Like, they're trying to bed in a new style here as well, and you can't underestimate that either. Like Ange had them playing a very set way, and you're starting to see the changes now with Brendan, and that's going to take time in itself. And that to me is, it's not like we had Brendan last season and we had Brendan this season, and you're expecting them just to pick up from where they left off. It's a new coach. New tactics, new strategy. That's going to take time, even if you've got the same players, which we don't. We've got new players playing as well. So I'm willing to cut slack. We're getting the results. We're not necessarily getting the performance yet, but if it's a means to an end and to getting to where we need to be, then I'd much rather be picking up 3 points and saying, all right, well, yeah, we can play better than we dropped 2 points and so. Yeah, like I said, yeah.
Look, absolutely, and I think that's, to your point. As long like this early in the season, as I said earlier on, if we're getting the result, then as long as we're getting, we need reinforcements in. We need 2 or 3 extra people in the building. We ideally need a few out, but for me, it's more important we get new people in. And if we're stuck with a fat squad that are bumped off to the reserves or train with the kids, then so be it. Like, that's a bigger issue for somebody else to deal with. But from a team point of view, we need people in the door. And yeah, you're right. We need to get they get used to the system. They played, the bulk of the group played for 2 years in Ange's system, and they were so well drilled into that system that some of that will become sort of almost muscle memory, right? And they've got to kind of actively unpick some of that. Some of the tactical stuff this week was pretty interesting. Like, they went diagonal to Maeda quite a lot, especially first half, and had some success with it. I thought Maeda, see if Maeda had scored 1 or 2 of his chances, he'd have easily been man of the match. He was, and I know there's loads of stuff on social media again, super frustrated with him, like. But I think I've certainly said this. I'm sure we all have. If he scores as more of his chances, he's not playing for Celtic, right? He's absolutely at the elite level, because everything else, or nearly everything, his link-up play and his finishing, if you took those up a few notches,
all his physicality, all his physical traits, right?
But he's, his work rate's ridiculous. He gets in behind. His link-up play, like, he goes constantly. He's such a good team player. He defends as hard as he attacks. And he got his assist for the opener. So he had a really pretty good game. It just, obviously, that final. But even the chance that everybody's going, oh, he ran in and then he sort of, he took himself wide and he had a shot blocked. That led to the goal ultimately, because we managed to retain the ball and keep it in and recycle it back around, and then Yang has a great bit of skill and a beautiful finish by O'Reilly. So even though in the face of it, he's blowing a really good chance, he's taken us like 40, 50 yards up the park. And from this next phase, we get the goal that clinches the 3 points. So
the one he has 2 yards out as well, that's an unbelievable block by the defender, to be honest.
That
right?
block.
Like,
that block.
You can't really fault Maeda for that,
At first view, I thought, oh, how's he missed that? And then you see the replay, and the defending with Devlin, I think, wasn't it?
That makes up for his header back to Kyogo.
Absolutely. It's just, it's. I think in commentary, in the Celtic TV commentary, they said that that's just like that's just defensive instinct, and it was. He just like sort of launched himself, and on another day, he might have gotten, there might have been an arm in there, and it was a penalty or whatever. But he manages to get a decent leg on it, and he's. Because you think when that stays out from 3 yards, you think, oh, Maeda's got sort of scuffed this a bit, or what's he done here? But then, on the replay, it's just that he gets a good contact. He does pretty much everything right, and it's just an incredible bit of defending. But so that's quite a big, it's quite a big digression from my point of it was interesting to see us go more direct and diagonal, and it wasn't just one player that tasked with hitting that. Ralston was hitting the pass. I think Cameron Carter Vickers was doing it, and I think there was somebody else, midfield was doing it as well. And it tried it 3 or 4 times, and it had a reasonable bit of success. And then it was mostly first half, but I did see it tried a couple of times in the second half. So it's interesting to see that we'll go that direct that quickly, which I don't think Rodgers did too much the first time he was here, and obviously Ange never really did it.
I was listening to the Tifo podcast earlier, and they were talking about how that's the new trend in English football is to be more direct. As a long ball is part of the tactics now because teams will be compact to one side of the pitch. So to open it up with a big switch, which was something that Andrew's trying to introduce and with not much success. So we'll see. I don't know. It might just be that Aberdeen were really having that high press. It was given us the space, or it might just be that that's going to be something that we're trying to do to try and get around these compact low blocks. I don't know.
Brendan Rodgers did say that we used it too much in the first half. So in his post-match, he did actually say that we probably went direct a wee bit too much. He says he likes to mix it up. He likes to have the option, but he felt in the first half that we're probably trying to force the issue probably just a wee bit more than he would have liked. So interesting. But just like I said, so it is that different sort of style of play. But I'll just quickly touch on Kilgore's goal because I mean, as much as Mickey Devlin, obviously his header was way off target, and I don't know what he was thinking. He was obviously thought he was a lot further up the park than what he actually was, but Kilgore still had to finish it, and his first touch was just sublime. He just takes the ball away from the defenders, looks up, sets himself, and there was only ever going to be one outcome. But if that falls to Maeda or maybe Lillabada, but if it falls to one of the other players, is that a guaranteed goal? I don't know, but Kilgo usually give him half a chance, but it's just that clinical aspect to his game, and he's just, everyone's saying on Twitter this weekend he's the best player we've had since Larson, and I think, I think
best striker,
best striker, yes, I think that's fair. He's just the wee man's just got everyone all over the place at the moment. The defenders don't know what they're doing. We talked about it last week, dropping deep and moving around, and as you say, you might have said it on the Axum podcast yesterday, Sean, that he was getting fouled quite deep, and the Aberdeen players were getting away with it, whereas Cal McGregor got booked for pretty much nothing. So I think a few of them got away with it, but Kevin Clancy was Clancy, wasn't he? He was all over the place.
That was
and the linesman for that goal. The linesman for that goal. I mean, what was that all about? I mean,
it was like a yard on side, right? But like, to be fair, right, he's got VAR backing him up, so who cares, right? He's like, commit either way. I don't really care. Commit to whatever you feel and think. I honestly don't care about that. We could have had 2, maybe 3 penalties. Aberdeen should have had 3 at least yellow cards. The wall for the free kick that Matt Riley goes to take. When you look at the lines on the pitch, it's 6 yards away. And Matt Riley's like, "What's going on here?" And the referee's just like, "Get on with it," right? It was, and he almost
and he still got it up and down. I know
it was not a bad free kick.
Yeah, but Kevin Clancy was bad, man. Aberdeen got away with absolute murder. They did not know how to deal with Maeda. All they were doing was obstructing his runs, which is a foul. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to go across the man when the ball's not there. You're just not allowed to.
There's a lot of sharp pulling as well, and quite blatant sharp pulling, just or arm pulling, and just allowed to go. As you say, the Carmack one, it's a foul all day long. Of course it is, but he's just getting beaten for pace, so he just moves his body across him. But then it's a coming together. It's just legs tangling. There's no malice in that. It's a bit harsh to book him for that.
I actually think it was a yellow, but I think there should have been 4 or 5. At least 3 or 4 yellow
by the letter of the law, probably. But you've also got to look at consistency across the game. And if
there was a worse one by the Serbian defender. I don't know his name. The new one, Brzezinski. Sorry, I can't remember. I'm trying not to be racist here. The new boy with the skinheads. He did one in the first half that was worse.
Boots.
Yeah. Nicky Devlin did one. It was worse, right? It was Nicky Devlin could have been red carded, right? Should have been a penalty. This one that bounces up onto the elbow. And they get in, like, I don't know who the Sky commentator was, but he just kept saying, "Oh, the phrase he used at least 3 or 4 times was not enough in that for me." Like, yeah, we get it. Like,
it was Ian Crocker and
Crocker?
and Chris Sutton.
It wasn't Chris Sutton, so it was Ian Crocker.
Oh well, you must have someone else then.
It wasn't Chris Sutton using that phrase, is what I mean.
No, well, the one we Kilgo got knocked down in the box. Chris Sutton said there wasn't enough in that for me. He used that phrase.
Well, maybe they were both saying it then.
For that one, probably both saying it.
Yeah, maybe they both said it. Yeah, but I was like, nah. I mean, it wasn't Kyogo getting knocked down. That one, there wasn't a clear replay. It was more than Maeda one. So like the one where Maeda gets barged in the back, that's for me is a penalty, right? The one where Abada gets fouled and the Clancy gives a goal kick when the ball hadn't gone out of play. Like,
Yeah.
just it's like,
It's
where
really
at what
odd.
point
it's
was
like,
that ball out of play?
well, yeah, it's probably a penalty, but rather than a penalty, we're going to give a goal kick, even though it's not gone out yet.
Yeah, it didn't. I couldn't see.
And we never,
how
and I
they
don't know,
thought it
like,
was out.
I assume we get the same picture. Like, I think Celtic TV just carry the whatever pictures the main broadcaster's using. So I assume
They
it was the
do,
same
yeah.
on Sky or beIN or whoever. And there was no replay of that. So nobody wanted to go. Because, like, if you think about, obviously, we only saw like a side on shot, and there was a bit, the ball's a bit off the ground, so you can see a little bit of grass between it. But we know that it only needs to be a millimeter, like from the penalty shootout the other night in the Women's World Cup, when it was like a millimeter.
Or
Not,
Japan in the World Cup
off being, over like, so there's not a chance. Like, the same reason that every time somebody takes a corner, it looks like it's outside of the sort of quarter circle, but clearly,
Part of the ball's touching
part of the ball is above it, right? So there's no way that was out. I'm convinced that was still in play, but we've not seen a replay. And I don't know, like, would that not fall under, because is it because he's given the goal kick that we can't check VAR?
You can't really re-referee it, I don't think.
So if
the ball's out of play, then the ball's out of, yeah.
But it
I'm
wasn't,
actually quite happy with how they're using VAR in the last like 3, 4, 5 months. I'm quite happy with it. VAR has been coming in a lot less than it has in the past, and I'm quite happy with it.
It's happening.
There's been maybe 5, 6 things that I can remember, not the specific decisions, but 5 or 6 times in a row. Maybe I can remember thinking that decision's wrong, but I also don't think VAR should have came in because it's not clear and obvious. So there's like, my consistent feeling is that referee was wrong, but my also feeling in is it's not super obvious. It's subjective enough that I'd rather VAR wasn't interfering, if that makes sense. I know that's easier to say when your team's consistently winning, but that's my kind of feeling on it.
They're certainly making decisions more quickly, which was one of the biggest grievances last year, as it was taking an age on stuff that we would eyeball once, either live or on one replay, and go, well, that's either that or the other. And they were taking 2 or 3 minutes to make decisions, and so we're not at that anymore, which is, it's got to be a good thing.
I thought it was a good tangent. We will come back to the Celtic game, but this seems like a good tangent to bring up a feature that I'd like to introduce that I just told you guys about before. So this is a new thing to you, but something that we could maybe do each week, and maybe people can post nominations on Twitter if they wish for the cinch moment of the weekend, or even of the week. And this week, my cinch moment was Hearts putting up their technical director for post-match interviews. What do you fellas make of this shambles that is going on at Tynecastle at the moment with the
is this? So I'm assuming, so they put Naismith up to do the interviews, even for McAvoy is the manager. Yeah.
So Stephen Naismith comes out to the post-match interviews, and the head coach, the manager, McAvoy, is not coming anywhere near the cameras. What are we making of this?
We know what's happening, right? He's not got the badges to be the manager as far as they're in Europe. I think as soon as they get knocked out of Europe, it's a UEFA ruling as far as I understand it. So you've got to have your certain sort of FIFA or UEFA badges, coaching badges, to be the head coach. So, and be in European competition. So they're obviously in the mix for either the Europa or the Europa Conference. And they've basically drafted in he's a stooge, isn't he?
Who is this guy?
So Frank McAvoy, I think, is his name. He's been, I think, around the club. I think he was involved at some point last season.
56.
I'm pretty sure he was on the bench. He was in there as part of their backroom staff last year, and so effectively they've swapped positions, at least on paper, and he's now the head coach because he has his badges, and Naismith is the football director or technical director or head of football.
Apparently he was the academy director before McAvoy.
Yeah, he's been on their books, right? So I read there was even more interesting interviews before the first games of the season. Like, he came out and said, "Oh, I'm the manager," and they did this joint interview, and then Naismith started talking over him. It's a bit of a farce, isn't it? Like, at the end of the day, we all know what's going on. As soon as Hearts exit Europe, there will be an announcement that says Naismith's the manager, and he's not anymore. He's back to the backroom staff, and there's as good as almost admitted that in one of the early interviews. So, or somebody was asked, is this sort of setup going to continue for the whole season? And they were a bit like, oh, well, it'll be under review as we go, or something like that. So it's pretty obvious what's going to happen once they're not bound by the UEFA the rules. He'll take over. I assume he's doing his badges in the background, but it doesn't sound like there was any expectation that he would have completed them before the end of this season. So I think their idea is he'll get them done over the course of this year, and then by next season, if he's done well enough to keep his job, whichever job it is, then he might be back as a official head coach next season. So yeah, it's a bit of a farce, isn't it? It's typical Scottish football. Like, everything's a bit weird and stupid and silly and different, and yeah,
that's why we love it.
It's well, we do, but it's clear they're clearly just leveraging a loophole, aren't they?
Yeah. Do you think so? We had Hibs help us out with the coefficient. Had a frankly excellent result, 3-1 home win against Luzerne. That's that in that last minute goal to put them 3-1 up could make all the difference over the two legs, because Switzerland are obviously right behind us in the coefficient. So this is great. These results are really important for Celtic. We want to keep that automatic qualification going. Anthony, our Hearts going to turn it around. They lost 2-1 away to Rosenborg, so they've got Rosenborg at Tynecastle this week. I'd imagine that'll be a sellout. No, don't think so. Rosenborg 10th in their league.
They're not beating Rosenborg at home. And then Hibs, interesting one. They beat Luzerne and then get beat 2-1 by Motherwell on the weekend. So then
they lost to St Mirren in
the league. Yeah,
lost to St Mirren last weekend. Does that put them at the bottom?
It's just
second bottom. St Johnstone are bottom.
Like, this is the thing that's like, oh, go play European football, but then they can't back it up 4 days later. This is the issue with the smaller Scottish teams in Europe. Like, it gets tricky for them. And what game do you prioritize? And Hibs, for me, they've got a mentality problem, because they can turn it on in one game and then be very, very average in another. So for me, that says mentality and mindset. That doesn't necessarily mean that they haven't got the talent, but and with some of the absolute dross that the manager comes away with, I'm
I don't think they'll be. It's not a surprise to see they started a bit poorly in the league. They were in the league. They weren't in the league. Were they in the League Cup? No, St Johnstone League. Anyway, I think some of their preseason games were a bit ropey and stuff like that, and they've obviously brought in a few players and stuff. And I think they're probably too good to be mired down there all season, but it's not a surprise to see them not start the best, particularly try to juggle.
Well, the manager was one game away from the sack last season. Remember the Osakiko between?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't be surprised to see him get the bullet at some point this season, but I also don't think that they'll be relegation candidates. I think they'll be struggling to get the top six potentially. And that's probably not good enough. So yeah, he might well pay with his job, but I don't think they'll end up down in the bottom 2 or 3 for too long once the season starts rolling properly. But St Johnstone, I have tipped to struggling and to
Livingston for me.
I'd said St Mirren, so I'm well wide of the mark with that.
St Mirren starting all right.
2 from 2.
I just thought they were punching. I thought they were punching last year. That's all.
Robinson's not a bad manager.
Yeah, he tends to put teams together that punch above their collective, which you need in on the budget they are at in a league like ours. So I don't necessarily expect them to continue to fly as high as they are, but they'll be in the mix for a top 6 spot, I would have thought.
You have to say Kilmarnock have played Sevco and Aberdeen, and is that right? Sevco and Aberdeen, and they've got 4 points out of 6. That's pretty.
Yeah,
that's a surprise, right? You'd have had them down for 0 points before the season started with those two fixtures. I think sorry, not Aberdeen. Who is it? Hearts. Sorry, Hearts. Sevco and Hearts. Yeah, but even then, you still wouldn't have expected them to pick up anything from those 2 games. So fair play to them. And that's who we're playing next week. So hopefully they have a sharp downturn in form. The only other thing I noted in the Scottish football that was the women's star. What was the women's score actually?
9-0.
1-9-0.
Montrose against Montrose.
Yeah, so Montrose have just been promoted, and I've had a harsh reality check in the first week when we gubbed them 9-0. I think we were up 1-0 in 3 minutes. is it Lefersky? She scored 4 of the 9. There was an own goal in there, and
there's a lot of players I don't know now. There's a big turnover, so we'll see how it's looking. I'm hoping, because it was looking pretty grim for a while there with all the outgoings and not much incoming. So hopefully,
I think we've put together some decent players, to be honest. There's a couple on loan deals and stuff like that. There's a player from, I think, Real Madrid, maybe. And yeah, so I think there's some young talent that they've got in from key other, some big other teams that are loaning players out that can't make their first team. So, on the one hand, you'd say, well, do you want loan players? But the women's football as a whole seems to turn over players pretty constantly.
Well, we had a striker on loan from Birmingham last year, so I think you'd rather the Real Madrid player, right?
Well, yeah, but then she signs for Liverpool, right? And then, but like, if you look at somebody like Hayes, she signs a 3-year deal, and you don't see too many of those kicking around, right? I think Clark, she signed an extension as well, and obviously she's the skipper and been around for a while, and Hayes is a long-term Celtic fan, right? There's that, even though she's English, there's that photo of her as a kid in the Celtic top, and she's talked about being a fan and stuff. So there's these odd players that you'll get on a longer-term deal, but it seems like a lot of them just want to be on a short-term deal, and then because the women's game, I guess, is developing so quickly.
It's growing.
It's growing quickly. Right? There's money getting thrown at it by certain clubs, so they want to leave themselves available to jump on opportunities.
And theoretically, their careers are shorter as well if they do want to have a family at some point as well. So they kind of
certainly interrupted, right? We look at Gorey, for example, in the Matildas. She's just come back after a year out having her kid and stuff. So, and she had the World Cup as a target to get back for, and she made it. But it's definitely going to interrupt careers, potentially if they choose to do that. So, look, it'll be interesting to keep an eye on that over the course of the year.
The only other Celtic-related thing I noted was Barry Hepburn scored for Queen's Park, who won 2-1. That's them on 6 points from 2 games. Their team is exceptionally young. They have 16-year-old in goals. Barry Hepburn, I think, is 19, playing on the wing for them. So tracking that one was close. And Ben McPherson's gone on loan. I actually forgot to check if he'd started at the weekend. Maybe I'll check that later. But anyway, anything else you guys wanted to touch on from the wider world of football? The Scrooge McDuck Derby, Ange in England, anything like that? Or could we get back to the Celtic game? What do you think?
Well, I had a text message just come through a minute ago saying that Celtic's made a very strong interest in Ryan Fraser from Newcastle United. So
he's eligible for the Scottish coefficient.
He is.
He
was on my list. I didn't get to talk about this, but I did have him down as a potential because he obviously has not got a future at Newcastle. So, so he maybe be that Scott Sinclair older player that Rodgers likes to maybe throw into the mix. So I thought it'd definitely be a possibility. So we'll see what happens, I guess. But
I just noticed this before we came on air as well, as Neymar's going to Saudi Arabia as well. It's 90 million or something, 75. I don't know. But anyway, Luis Enrique didn't pick him on the weekend. He's got no interest in playing him this season, apparently. So he's off. That's another one. But I couldn't care less about Saudi League, to be honest.
Go and test himself out against the likes of Jack Hendry. It'll be a tough one for him. Right, so let's swing back to the Celtic game. So any final points we may have missed on the Celtic game, and who was your man of the match, Anthony? So those two
That's a good question, Sean. I must admit, people have talked with me, I've listened to a few different thoughts on this, and I was sort of like very of the opinion that I felt disappointed because he missed all his chances. But I guess in hindsight, he actually did have a good game. But I think he really needed to score one of those chances to be man of the match. Really impressed with Matt O'Reilly. I thought of the three midfielders, he was probably the best. Probably the best of a bad lot. But I thought he's took his goal exceptionally well. He timed his run, ghosted in, didn't overhit it, hit the target. Good goal. It's some 2-2 now. So I'm going to go with Matt O'Reilly as my man of the match. And yeah, I just hope maybe this is his season. Maybe he's one of the ones that lifts. And I suppose the other thing we didn't really touch on was Abada getting on the end of Maeda's header for the first goal, because again, good instinct, just that wanting to be there and wanting to be in the right position. So you can't necessarily teach that, but But the signs are good, and I think, like I say, we can't afford to lose any more players, like selling or whatever. But we really need to bring a few in just to bolster, because if Hatate and Carter Vickers are going to be out for potentially a few weeks, that does leave us pretty thin on top. And we've got a pretty horrific run of fixtures coming up. We were talking about this off air, and 7 away games or something like that between September and October. I think
it's 5 away games out of 7 league games.
Yeah, and they're out of the league, and then obviously you've got Champions League fixtures on top of that, and
away
as
in the
well.
League Cup.
So,
Away in the League Cup,
away in the League Cup, and that's the start of that's the Huns at Ibrox. So it's a really tough run of fixtures, and you don't want to be in a situation 2 years in Champions League in a row without Carter Vickers in the back line, because we missed him last season as well. So kind of hope that it was precautionary and he'll be back and AJ will be back, but I'd feel a lot better if we draft another 2 or 3 first team quality sort of starting type players, but I guess we'll see what happens over the next couple of weeks.
Just to work around just to rotate it a bit, Paul, I'll let you have the deciding, the final say. My man of the match, guys, I normally like to say, don't oversell on the goal scorers, but for me, it was such a close run thing between Maeda and O'Reilly for who was the best player. I think if Maeda had scored one of his chances and O'Reilly doesn't score that one, then I'd be giving it to Maeda. And on the basis of that, I would give it to Matt O'Reilly, same as you, Anthony. My only other thought from the game was we seem to be working on corners, like that little, the cheeky Alex Ferguson routine. Seem to be working on free kicks, but we don't seem to be working on goal kicks and throw-ins. So I'm hoping they get onto that in the training ground, because that was quite frustrating every time we had a goal kick or a throw-in, and it was not getting it. We were turning them over pretty consistently. It was very frustrating. Paul?
So it wasn't the deciding, but obviously, because
final. That's why I knew I was going to agree,
yeah.
Anthony. That's why I said final. Deciding.
But look, honourable mention to Tony Ralston. I was pretty critical of him last week. I thought he barely put a foot wrong. He certainly defended really well. He still didn't get forward as much. I guess while we're talking about the fullbacks, Taylor, we've talked about it. He had a poor game, but I definitely saw that they were still inverting. There's a fair amount of inverting going on. They're not really. Occasionally, Ralston was getting around the outside, but their starting position was quite far in field, and Taylor never really tried to get around the outside. I don't think it's his game. But I guess my worry about Taylor is he's principally a defender, right? And he's been a weak link as a defender pretty much always, and that sort of mirrored because in Ange's system he wasn't asked to do a lot of defending. He was an additional midfielder, and then he also got quite high up the pitch. So we definitely need another left back because Bernaby doesn't look much like a defender either. So left back for sure. It looks like Lagerbilka, there's a fair amount of, if that's how you pronounce it, it looks like that is probably going to happen, which is good. He looks a decent signing. But I agree with both of you guys. Matt O'Reilly I thought he had a great game. Aside from his goal, he was, and I think best of a bad lot's probably a little bit underselling it. I think he had a really good game. His delivery from set pieces was good. I think it was his corner for Miera's header for the Abada goal.
Mm-hmm. It was.
He was just neat and tidy. And again, he was asked to play kind of in different parts of the pitch, in midfield at different points during the match. So, after he played well for good chunks of last season, but it took him a long time to get up and running on the score sheet. So he'll be delighted to have 2 from 2, and hopefully he just goes from strength to strength. But I agree with you. So it's a full house. Matt O'Reilly, man of the match.
Full house for Matt O'Reilly. Well, we are just about to tick over an hour. So any final goodbyes, Anthony?
It was really good to catch up with my parents. They've moved down south, so I got to spend some time with them on the weekends. That was really nice. Watched the season finale of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. Left it on a cliffhanger, which is a little bit annoying, but I highly do recommend that you check that out. And go the Matildas, and obviously go Celtic on Sunday.
Paul?
Yeah, I'll do a little music recommendation. So a local Perth band called the Deanies. I may or may not have mentioned these guys previously, but they had a single out a month or so ago called Last Minute Winner. Therefore, they're all footy fans. Although I think one of them might be a Rangers fan, but we'll let that slide. They've got pretty good. They got pretty good music. But yeah, they're a bunch of Scottish, Irish, and English kids. Their parents would have been all of that, and they came out a few years. So the kids they still sound English and Scottish and Irish and Welsh, but they grew up here. So yeah, Last Minute Winner by the Deanies, and just generally check out their stuff on Spotify. Yet to put a full album out, but I would imagine that will probably happen this year or maybe very early next.
The only thing I'm thinking about this week is Matildas. Let's go World Cup fever. Wednesday night, absolutely buzzing. Can't wait. Other than that, thanks everyone for listening in. Can you please like this video, please? This one specifically. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Alerts if you want to know when we're going live. You don't have to do the subscribe thing, but please the alert thing, but please do the subscribe thing. And then check us out on all these other social medias as well. And if you want to follow us on Twitter, because 1 hour of us three is not enough for you. Seems pretty unlikely, but there's an option there. Or what's it called now? X. What we call it instead of tweets? Just who knows?
We'll call it Twitter.
Call it Twitter.
Okay, fair enough. We'll stick to tweets and Twitters. Okay, other than that, we'll sign off for tonight. Thanks again for listening. Hopefully get a win for the Matildas and Celtic. Hail, hail.
Yeah.